Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to also thank Howard Baker for taking time to be here, a man of uncommon wisdom. My son Tom also has uncommon wisdom. He decided to change career streams when he was at Stanford. Instead of going to law school, ended up with a PhD in statistics. So when I started law school, to tell you how the world changes, I'm 63 years old. When I got out of law school, school teachers earn more than beginning lawyers. Sometimes we wish the ways of the past were to return. One of the favorite sayings of former Chief Justice Earl Warren was that one person and the truth is a majority. It is from this perspective that I speak today as one person who in the court of oral opinion has led the defense of the truth about the assassination, the defense of the Warren Commission, and the defense of Earl Warren, a jurist whose integrity was above reproach, a man who has become a 1990s victim of a version of McCarthyism. At one time, Earl Warren was best known for his leadership in breaking down the barriers of discrimination and the landmark decision of Brown v. Board of Education. But today, America's young people know him best as he is portrayed in the Warner Brothers film JFK, as a liar, as an incompetent, and as someone who participated in a cover-up of the truth about the assassination of President Kennedy. What far right-wing extremists try to persuade a majority of Americans to believe in the 1960s with their impeach Earl Warren billboards, Hollywood has been able to achieve in the 1990s in its impeachment of the integrity of a great Chief Justice. Earl Warren is not the only victim. The Kennedy assassination is called a coup d'etat, a public execution by elements of the CIA and the Department of Defense, while President Lyndon B. Johnson is called an accessory after the fact. In other words, a murderer. When a film not only alleges conspiracy but names the guilty parties, it goes beyond just artistic license and entertainment. It crosses the threshold of slander and character assassination. And as if telling these lies are not enough, Warner Brothers has now gone one step further and is helped financing the mailing of 13,000 copies of a JFK study guide to high school studies and social studies history departments and colleges. The text supposedly has been approved by Warner Brothers and is accompanied by a film poster and a 2-page exercise sheet, and hopefully they'll be able to sell a lot of videos that way. All of this is in the context of a film that professes to speak the truth, dedicated to the young, in whose spirit the search for the truth marches on, declares the film at the end. The truth is the most important value we have, proclaims Kevin Costner as he portrays New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison. In fact, to incorporate JFK in any school curriculum misrepresents the truth the same way that Joseph Goebbels misrepresented the truth as he cranked up the propaganda machine for Nazi Germany, bringing disinformation into the media and into the classrooms of German schools. If you want to understand the tools of the trade of Warner Brothers, Stone, and Costner in perpetrating their massive fraud, remember the letters MOLD, which stands for the acronym MOLD. Misrepresentations, omissions, lies, and dollars. Perhaps the best place to begin to understand how devious are the misrepresentations of JFK is to examine the words of Mr. Stone and his attacks on the Warren Commission, and I might add on me. The March 9 issue of New York Magazine published a letter written by Stone with the help of the Hill & Knowlton Public Relations Agency, the people who worked with BCCI and also received more than $10 million from the Kuwait government to help spread this information. Mr. Stone cited as his primary, quote, consensus authority supporting his attacks on the Warren Commission, the 1979 report of the House Select Committee on Assassinations. But Oliver Stone deliberately covered up the fact that the House panel's ultimate conclusion on page 41 of the report was, and I quote, Lee Harvey Oswald fired 3 shots at President John F. Kennedy. 2 shots hit and 1 shot missed. That's exactly what the Warren Commission found. and is diametrically opposite to Mr. Stone and JFK's versions of the truth, where supposedly Lee Harvey Oswald didn't kill anyone. And there were 3 different gunmen, what the Warner Brothers film calls triangulation. JFK claims that the shot that killed President Kennedy was fired from the front. The House Committee's report on page 43 directly contradicts this, as did the Warren Commission, concluding, and I quote, that President Kennedy was struck by 2 and only 2 bullets, each of which entered from the rear. That's what Mr. Stone's authority says. The House Committee's report further concluded that notwithstanding the backward movement of President Kennedy's head and body in the Zapruder film after the fatal shot struck, the central focus of the movie and television attacks on the Warren Commission findings, and now I quote again, there is no medical evidence that the president was struck by a bullet entering the front of the head. And the second bullet which hit President Kennedy, and I quote again, caused a massive wound to the president's head upon exit. Expert testimony showed, and I quote again, that nerve damage from a bullet entering the president's head could have caused his back muscles to tighten, which in turn could have caused his head to move toward the rear. The phenomenon was demonstrated in a filmed experiment which involved the shooting of goats. These goats, by the way, because there are dog lovers and horse lovers, but evidently not many goat lovers in the country. Also, like the Warren Commission, the House Committee's report on the basis of the findings of its medical panel and on the basis of neutron activation analysis, and I'm going to quote again, concluded that a single bullet passed through both President Kennedy and Governor Connally. On this question, which has been called the most controversial issue in the Warren Commission report, and which JFK claims couldn't happen, the House Committee's, and I quote again, forensic pathology panel's conclusion were consistent with the so-called single bullet theory advanced by the Warren Commission. What about the murder of Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit, what I've called the Rosetta Stone to understanding the truth about the assassination of President Kennedy? JFK asserts that Oswald was a patsy and did not do it. But like the Warren Commission, the House report concluded, and I quote, that Oswald shot and killed Officer Tippit. The committee further concluded that, and I'm quoting again, this crime committed while fleeing the scene of the assassination was consistent with the finding that Oswald assassinated the president. The fundamental differences between the committee's report and the Warren Commission's findings stem primarily from purported acoustical evidence involving oscillating waves made from an examination of a cassette tape of a Dallas police radio recording. The House Committee split on this issue. The majority claimed that this evidence indicated the presence of a second gunman who missed everything. If you were actually down in Dallas to see where it was, you could almost impossibly miss everything, shooting downhill 125 feet away and miss not just the occupants of a limousine, but the presidential limousine itself. The dissent of the minority was vindicated when this acoustical evidence was subsequently disproved by the May 14, 1982 report of the Committee of Ballistic Acoustics of the National Research Council. It was chaired by Professor Norman Ramsey of the Harvard Physics Department, which found no scientific validity for it. Moreover, the 1982 definitive study further found that the point on the tape where oscillating waves supposedly indicated the sounds of another shot actually occurred on the tape more than 1 minute after the assassination. There you have, in essence, the scruples and deception of Mr. Stone. He attacks the Warren Commission, citing as his consensus authority the House Committee report as if it disagreed with the identification of Oswald as a lone gunman, when in fact the committee's report corroborated the conclusions of the Warren Commission that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman who killed President Kennedy, wounded Governor Connally, and killed Officer Tippit. The revisionist history of JFK combines these kinds of misrepresentations with wholesale omissions of critical evidence and testimony as the producers and actors weave their web of deceit. For instance, the movie covers up the single most important witness to the assassination, Howard Brennan, who actually saw the gunman fire from the southeast corner window of the 6th floor school book depository building. He called this to the attention of the police. When officers went to that window, they found 3 cartridge cases and a large paper bag used to carry the rifle into the building. The bag had Oswald's palm print and fingerprint, but you'll never see Brennan or the cartridge cases or the paper bag with the palm print of Oswald and the fingerprints in JFK. Another example of the omissions in JFK involves the 6 eyewitnesses who saw the gunman at the Tippit murder scene or running away from the Tippit murder scene with gun in hand and unequivocally identified the gunman as Lee Harvey Oswald. These key eyewitnesses include cab driver William Scoggins, Jr., who saw Oswald from as close as 12 feet. Barbara Davis and Virginia Davis, who saw Oswald cut across their lawn from a distance as close as 20 feet, saw him toss cartridge cases in the bushes as he reloaded his pistol. They turned the cartridge cases over to the police, and these were determined to have come from the revolver that Oswald pulled out in the Texas theater. But you'll never see Scoggins or the Davis sisters-in-law or these cartridge cases in JFK. Nor will you see in JFK the truth about why Oswald was arrested. JFK would have the audience believe that this, in the words of Costner, and this is one of the most despicable aspects of JFK, and it just tells exactly what Oliver Stone is. The arrest of Oswald was the, quote, most remarkable example of police intuition since the Reichstag fire, alluding to Hitler's rise to power. And there are repeated allusions to Hitler in the film. JFK would also have the viewer believe that the police knew, someone knew Oswald was going to be there, and that the police used it as an excuse for coming to the theater, the fact that Oswald did not purchase a 75-cent ticket. This false claim is not new. It goes back to the very first of the best-selling books attacking the Warren Commission, Mark Lane's Rush to Judgment. Like Lane's book, the Warner Brothers film covers up the testimony of Johnny Calvin Brewer, like Howard Brennan, cab driver Scoggins, another one of the key witnesses whose testimony I took while serving as counsel of the Warren Commission. Brewer managed a shoe store only 8 blocks away from the Tippit murder shooting. He heard of the shooting. He heard police coming down. He heard police sirens coming down the street approximately 15 minutes after the shooting. He saw a man, later he identified the man as Oswald, duck into a shoe store as the police sirens approached, and when the police sirens ebbed, the man left. Brewer became suspicious. I asked him what happened. He says, well, I trailed him. I said, why? Because he looked funny. His hair was messed up. He looked like he'd been running. Brewer trailed him to the nearby Texas theater, had the cashier call the police, pointed at Oswald when the police arrived, and when the police approached Oswald, he pulled out a pistol, which turned out to be the Tippit murder weapon. All of this is omitted in JFK. They claim it's Hitler-like police intuition that causes the police to be there. If any more examples of wholesale omissions are needed to show how JFK covers up the truth, one can turn to Postal Inspector Harry Holmes, the single most important witness on the question of Jack Ruby, on whether Jack Ruby was conspiratorially involved. Virtually every assassination sensationalist who attacks the Warren Commission claims that the ultimate proof of the conspiracy is the killing of Oswald by Ruby. But like JFK, they omit and cover up Holmes' crucial testimony. Holmes was involved in helping trace the mailing of Oswald's revolver and rifle to his post office box in Dallas that he was renting under the alias A.J. Hedel. And when I interrogated Holmes, he told me how on Sunday morning, November 24th, 2 days after the assassination, he was on his way to church with his wife. And at the last minute, he dropped her off and decided to go down to the police station to see if he could help his friend Captain Fritz, the head of the homicide section of the Dallas Police Department, with whom Holmes had been working. When Holmes arrived, the last interrogation of Oswald was about to begin before Oswald was to be transferred to the county jail. Fritz invited Holmes into the interrogation room, together with representatives of the FBI and Secret Service. Because Holmes joined the group and asked a number of additional questions, the interrogation session was extended approximately 1/2 hour. Meanwhile, Jack Ruby was on his way downtown to wire money to one of his employees. He left the Western Union office at approximately 11:17 a.m. Central Time, according to the timestamp on the Western Union money order. And he walked approximately 1 block to the Dallas police station, went down the ramp, and joined a group of news people awaiting the transfer of Oswald, who came down a minute or two later. Oswald was killed at 11:21 a.m. had Postal Inspector Holmes just gone on to church that morning, Oswald would have been transferred long before Ruby ever got downtown. There never would have been a Warren Commission, and there never would be a David Belin standing before you speaking today. But you'll never see Holmes in JFK, and you'll never read about Holmes in any of the best-selling conspiracy books about the assassination. Nor will you hear in JFK about the other facts confirming that Ruby was conspiratorially innocent, such as the testimony of Ruby's rabbi, Hillel Silverman, who repeatedly visited Ruby in his jail cell and was absolutely convinced, based upon his intimate conversations, that Ruby was innocent of any conspiracy. Nor will you ever learn that a Warren Commission counsel, an independent lawyer from Des Moines by the name of David Belin, after being thwarted inside the Warren Commission when he requested a polygraph examination of Ruby, went around the Warren Commission and prevailed upon Ruby's rabbi to persuade Jack Ruby to demand a lie detector test. Nor will you learn that, in fact, Ruby did demand a lie detector test, and that the results of that lie detector test confirmed Ruby's conspiratorial innocence. All of this is covered up in JFK and in virtually all of the other movies, television shows, and best-selling assassination literature which attack the credibility of Earl Warren of the Warren Commission. Rabbi Silverman, by the way, was never even interrogated by the House Select Committee on Assassinations. I might add that they also denied me the opportunity of testifying in a public hearing. The repeated use of outright lies is the third element that combines with major misrepresentations and omissions as assassination sensationalists attack the Warren Commission and Earl Warren. Here is a typical example from JFK, which incorporates one of the central lies made by Lee Harvey Oswald during his interrogation. Oswald was initially arrested for the murder of Officer Tippit, and when he was first interrogated, he claimed he did not own a rifle. When he was shown the well-known photograph of him holding a rifle and pistol, he claimed that he knew a lot about photography and that the picture was a fake with his head being placed on someone else's body. That was a blatant lie, and anyone who objectively looks at the facts can determine this. Because in the manufacturing process of every camera, there are microscopic differences which are just as distinctive as a fingerprint. If one has a negative, it can be scientifically determined whether that negative came from that camera to the exclusion of all other cameras in the world. After Oswald's arrest, police discovered not just the photographic print, but the negative of that print in Oswald's camera. That negative came from Oswald's camera. The very fact that JFK adopts the lies of Oswald and asserts that the picture was part of a frame-up is a vivid example of how a movie dedicated to the truth incorporates outright lies together with misrepresentations and omissions, as the movie persuades its audience that Earl Warren and the Warren Commission covered up the truth. The big D, dollars, is a final link in the efforts of Warner Brothers, Costner, and Stone to rewrite history. I am amazed that so few people have taken time to address the common sense aspects of how dollars have played such an important role in the national controversy about the assassination of President Kennedy. As a practical matter, we are in the court of world opinion, and it is therefore reasonable to draw upon the experience of our courts and jury system. In every jury trial, one of the central issues is the credibility of each witness, every person who tries to persuade the jury of her or his version of the facts. One of the most important questions is whether or not the witness has a financial interest in the outcome of the controversy. I have made full final financial disclosure from the very beginning. Every dollar I have received for my 2 books about the Kennedy assassination, November 22, 1963, and Final Disclosure, has been turned over to charity. Every dollar from lecture fees, every dollar from magazine and newspaper articles has also been turned over to charity. It seems to me that when people go around accusing Earl Warren of participating in a cover-up of the truth, accusing Lyndon Johnson of being an accessory after the fact, accusing elements of the CIA and the Department of Defense of plotting and carrying out the assassination of President Kennedy, they have an obligation to make full financial disclosure so that the world knows how much money they're making out of these accusations. It is most surprising to me that the press has not come forward to demand this kind of an accounting. Warner Brothers, Costner, and Stone not only are making millions, but they have a piece of the action. Every movie ticket, every video they hope to have our public schools purchase. The power of Warner Brothers has been aided and abetted by a $15 million promotion budget and a vast public relations machine that has helped break down the barriers between news and entertainment, between truth and revisionist fiction. One of the most dangerous aspects about the disinformation of JFK is how the television networks in their quest for ratings have helped promote the lies about Earl Warren and the Warren Commission. Here are some examples of how disinformation is spread. Everyone knows the three major television networks are in a battle of ratings for the morning news and entertainment programs. When the publicity machine of Warner Brothers was preparing its war against the truth, they went to NBC and said that if NBC wanted Kevin Costner, one of the biggest names in Hollywood, to appear exclusively on the Today Show, and not at any other competing network show in December, NBC had a guarantee that JFK would have 5 segments on 5 consecutive days. NBC agreed. On the other hand, when I asked for 5 segments to respond, I was given only 1. Here's another example. Oprah Winfrey decided to have Oliver Stone in the program for a full hour promoting the film. Before he appeared, I asked for equal time. I was refused. After he appeared, I asked for equal time. Again, Earl Warren and the Warren Commission were not allowed 1 minute of defense. You heard our chairman say, and this is the truth, that in almost all of these nationally televised programs, the audience is told as a part of giving authenticity to the claims of the assassination sensationalists that more than 3/4 of Americans do not believe the Warren Commission report. But if the only movies that audiences see attack the Warren Commission, and if nationally known shows like the Oprah Winfrey Show and the Johnny Carson Show present only those who have a financial interest in promoting misrepresentations, omissions, and lies, it is only natural to expect that the majority of Americans do not believe that Oswald was a lone gunman. This leads into what I believe to be one of the worst aspects of the media blitzkrieg of the Warner Brothers film. JFK opens with a segment of newsreel footage from an address by President Dwight Eisenhower when he talked about the potential dangers of the power of the industrial military complex. From my perspective, this nation today faces an equally great potential danger from the growing incest within and among corporate giants controlling the entertainment business and the media business, and the breaking down of traditional barriers between entertainment and news with the quest for the almighty dollar coming first. And I might interject to say, you go by the plaque at the front of this National Press Club and read what Joseph Pulitzer has to say. A cynical, mercenary, demagogic press will produce, in time, a people as base as itself. And that's what JFK is producing. Bill Moyers, in a very perceptive op-ed piece published in the March 22 New York Times, wrote, "How does a reporter tell the difference anymore in a world where Oliver Stone can be praised for his, quote, journalistic instincts, close quote, when he has Lyndon Johnson tell a cabal of generals and admirals, get me elected and I'll get you your war? Rolling Stone dubs this all the new news, straight news. The old news, by Rolling Stone's definition, is pooped, confused, and broke. In its place, a new culture of information is evolving, a heady concoction, part Hollywood film and TV, part pop music and pop art, mixed with popular culture and celebrity magazines, tabloid telecasts, cable, and home video. And in packaging the new news, Hollywood can use its millions of dollars to buy just about anything they want to build their case. For instance, over the years, there have been 4 panels of medical experts who have examined the Kennedy autopsy photographs and x-rays, a total of about 20 doctors. 19 out of the 20 unequivocally state that the material showed that all of the shots came from the rear. And this confirms with the physical facts because they found the fragments of the bullet that struck President Kennedy's head. 2 are complete enough to be ballistically identifiable. They came from Oswald's rifle. But there is a 20th doctor who more recently has said there was a simultaneous shot that hit the head and exploded and disintegrated, leaving no trace. When Oliver Stone decided to produce JFK, he used dollars to buy the services of a medical consultant. Guess which doctor he picked? Perhaps the ultimate irony in JFK is a proclamation of Mr. Costner. Hitler said, "The bigger the lie, the more people will believe it." Another illusion like why the police converged on the Texas theater. Mr. Stone, Mr. Costner, Warner Brothers are proving all of this to be true and making millions of dollars along the way. Furthermore, they want to spread the disinformation of JFK into our public schools and affect brainwashing students through the power of a commercial film and rewriting history the Hollywood way. And your chairman is correct. For this, the film has received 8 Academy Award nominations. For Hollywood to give any Academy Award to this massive misrepresentation of truth and character assassination of Earl Warren would be vivid evidence of the depth to which Hollywood standards of integrity, truth, and justice have fallen. There are some who assert in the face of the conspiracy barrage by the mass media, particularly movies and televisions, that we will never know the truth. That simply is not accurate. If one examines what judges call the record as a whole, not just the one doctor, but the 20 doctors, not just bits and pieces, but the entire record, then beyond a reasonable doubt, it is clear that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman who killed President Kennedy, wounded Governor Connally, and killed Officer Tippit on that tragic afternoon in Dallas, November 22, 1963. I want to close on a personal note. I am the majority about which Earl Warren has spoken, one person in the truth. My course has been steadfast. From the very first day in January 1954, when I became one of the counsel of the Warren Commission, I will never forget the words that Earl Warren said to all of us: "Truth is our only goal." I took him at his word. As a matter of fact, the most controversial part of the Warren Commission report, the so-called single bullet theory that the bullet that passed through President Kennedy's neck struck Governor Connally, grew out of an attempt on my part to prove there was more than one gunman. And if we had more time today, I would tell you the inside story of what led to the single bullet theory. I followed the truth as our only goal standards of Earl Warren when in 1975 I investigated the CIA, serving as executive director of the Rockefeller Commission. I was the one who confronted the CIA with no holds barred, extracted from them their admissions that they had been engaged in assassination plots against foreign leaders in peacetime. And when I returned to private life in the last half of 1975, I filed Freedom of Information Act requests to have all remaining classified Warren Commission documents and all CIA files pertaining to the assassination of President Kennedy released to the public. I have had access to all, and in no way did it contradict the conclusions of the Warren Commission. I asked for help to educate America about how a small group of assassination sensationalists who have been making huge amounts of money have, through the vehicle of misrepresentations, omissions, and lies, misled this entire nation on one of the major turning points of modern American history. It is what I call the prostitution of the assassination. If they can do it in the case of the assassination of President Kennedy, they can manipulate public opinion on other issues of even greater import, issues of war and peace. I also ask for your help to expose the corporate incest between huge Hollywood empires and the television networks, and the dangers that this poses to our democratic society as they rewrite the truth to fit their own mold. I ask for your help to show the tremendous danger that this kind of revisionist history poses to our democracy, and to place in clear perspective this media manipulation and the threat it poses. We are faced with the tragic decline of the relative importance of objective reporting of news by media conglomerates like Time Warner, where at one time it was Time magazine, the printed Time magazine, that had dominance, and today it is Warner Brothers, entertainment, media, accompanied by multi-million-dollar bonuses paid to executives grounded in maximizing dollars through entertainment with wide appeal to mass audiences. No one knows better than I the dangers to a free society that are posed by a CIA out of control. But from my perspective, I see an equally great, or perhaps even greater, long-range danger to our democratic institutions of government with the increasing control by the entertainment industry over our national media, particularly television. When misrepresentations, omissions, and lies are so effective that they can destroy the credibility of a great Chief Justice and the commission he chaired, and concurrently contribute to the destruction of trust and confidence of citizens in their democratic institutions of government, this can have grave consequences for our nation's future. In the epilogue of Final Disclosure, I write of citizen trust as the mortar that holds the structure of a democratic government together. If trust erodes, our democracy can crumble. And in the wake of erosion of citizen trust as an outgrowth of Vietnam, Watergate, the excesses of the CIA, Iran-Contra, the savings loan scandal, and most recently the Rubbergate scandals of Congress, we can ill afford to have citizens become so cynical of their government that they do not even believe the findings of an independent commission chaired by a former Chief Justice of the United States with the reputation of Earl Warren. This has been one of the major motivating factors for my continuing defense of Earl Warren, the Warren Commission, and the truth about the assassination of President Kennedy. Though I am just one independent lawyer from Des Moines, Iowa, and though my talents and abilities may be limited, I am nevertheless an optimist by nature. At the end of Final Disclosure, I wrote that the truth has a long fuse, and ultimately it prevails. Please help shorten the length of that fuse by digging the way journalists are supposed to dig and exposing the more than 100 major misrepresentations, omissions, and lies that have been perpetrated by Warner Brothers, Costner, and Stone. What they have done is just plain evil, and intelligent people who care for our country should not let them get away with it, particularly when they are now trying to invade our public schools with their lies. I call for your help in this battle for the truth because I believe in Walter Lippmann's standard that the press must put the truth first, and because I so fervently believe in another one of Earl Warren's favorite sayings: the only thing necessary for evil to exist is for good people to remain silent. Thank you. I'd be happy to take some questions.
I will ask them of you. Thank you. While we were here today, I'm told that Senator David Bourne of Oklahoma and Representative Louis Stokes, who headed the House Assassination Committee, today made plain their intention to open the closed files into the assassination. Do you support such a move? What is likely to emerge from the opening of the files?
I support such a move. I tried to do it in 1975. I can tell you what's, first of all, if every single piece of paper, every single document were laid out, it would absolutely have no bearing on the facts that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman who killed Kennedy, wounded Connally, and killed Tippit. What is likely to happen, and there are only about 2% of Warren Commission files that have not been released. They fall in four brief categories. One's involving privacy, people that made allegations that someone else was involved in the assassination, investigated and not disclosed for matters of privacy of the allegations made, like you were sitting in a restaurant in Oklahoma City when someone claimed they heard you say you were going to kill the president. Questions about matters of protection of the president, questions about sources and methods whereby they thought if they would disclose particular items of foreign intelligence, for instance, that would literally dry up the well, perhaps put someone's life in danger. I thought in 1975 that 11 years had passed and they could release it. It seems to me that the CIA will never release everything. By the way, if the CIA said they would release everything, people wouldn't believe it. But, and that's one of the reasons I talk about trust and confidence in government. When I investigated the CIA, by the way, I threatened them with polygraph exams to make sure that they would tell me the truth. I didn't have authority to do it, but I threatened it anyway. But in any event, you're likely to get the release of tens of thousands of pages. And it'll be interesting, but it won't change the conclusion. I support it. I hope they do it. And I'll look forward to it.
We have several questions along this line. how do you know that either the FBI or CIA did not withhold or distort information relating to the Kennedy assassination? Isn't an investigation like conducting discovery in the practice of law, so that you must say that you've had access to all the files on the assassination that the agencies hadn't hidden or destroyed?
I don't trust the FBI. I don't trust the CIA. I don't trust very many people in this country except my son Tom. I hope he trusts me. That's one of the reasons it was so important to have independent people outside of government. And although we initially started with looking at the FBI files and everything else, we did our own independent investigation. On the scene interrogation of witnesses, we found people that the FBI had never found, that the Dallas Police Department had never found. What you do see, though, is this, is that every lawyer, every practical lawyer knows that when you get a hold of a case, you start getting some semblance of the validity of the testimony of the witnesses, who you believe, who you don't believe. If everything were perfect, you know something's wrong. One of the things I wanted the Warren Commission to do would be to have the report in 2 volumes, including major transcript testimony, so that people would see the authenticity of what happened. When you read the writing of, when you read what someone said in the 5th floor below the assassination window, 3 employees, and one of them said that the vibrations actually put some plaster in his head, as part of the ceiling plaster fell down a little bit, and the other one said, well, you know what I said? And I said, no. He says, I said, no bullshit. Well, when you hear that kind of authenticity of testimony, you get it from the witnesses, you don't get it from reports. And people say the Warren Commission relied on reports. I didn't rely on FBI reports. I found a lot of inaccuracies. I relied upon evaluation of all the evidence, and it wasn't perfect. But if you have 6 people, for instance, that identify Oswald as the Tippit murderer, you see Scoggins, as he says, he sees this man headed toward his cab, which was parked, and he ducks down because he's afraid he's going to commandeer the cab, and he sees him as close as 12 feet. And you see 5 other people have the same thing, and you have with this a ballistic evidence to say, by God, he did kill Tippit. So it's the overall record from the witnesses themselves and the physical evidence.
Several people want you to answer on specific conspiracy theories. In your criticism, a questioner says, you failed to mention the colorized blow-up of Mary Moorman's photo showing a man in a policeman's uniform firing a rifle from the grassy knoll. Your response, please.
That rumor is rampant. It's just not true. There's no one firing from the grassy knoll in Mary Moorman's photograph. But I'll tell you a story. Mary Moorman was with her friend Jean Hill. Jean Hill's testimony is in transcript form. You know, we published 26 volumes of testimony and exhibits with the Warren Commission. And Jean Hill testified that she was the closest person to the presidential limousine when the fatal shot struck about 15 or 20 feet away. And when we asked her, I wasn't the one who interrogated, but when she was asked to describe what she saw, well, she saw the Kennedys in the back seat, and between them there was a fuzzy white dog. Well, I don't think anyone believes there was a fuzzy white dog, but people's memories are inaccurate. There is no gunman in Mary Moorman's picture. Now, people have blown it up. One of the people that talks about this is a man, Grodin, that goes around and one time said that there was a gunman in an ornamental tree, and a tree in the grassy knoll area. And when the Rockefeller Commission days, we examined that tree. It was 8 feet high with a trunk this feet thick, that supposedly there was a gunman in that window. I'm going to add one other thing, though, and I think this is awfully important for people to understand. You got to take a look at all of these things with an aspect of common sense. Who do you think wanted to find out more than anyone else in the world who killed President Kennedy? The answer to that question probably is Robert Kennedy, his brother, the Attorney General, who headed the Justice Department, oversaw the FBI, and had a liaison with the Warren Commission, working full-time. His name was Howard Willans. He's a lawyer here in Washington. One of his partners, Ron Green, is in the room here. If there was triangulation, if there was a second gunman, my gosh, Bobby Kennedy would have wanted to get that person that helped kill his brother. But no one seems to want to talk about common sense. The Moorman picture story is just false.
Well, here's another one in the current crop. How about the new book, Mortal Error? Contains a ballistic theory that the third shot, the headshot that struck the president, was as a result of an accidental discharge of a Secret Service weapon.
You know, I can be here for the next year. There isn't one question that anyone can raise about the facts of who killed President Kennedy that I cannot fully respond to and document if you give me time. I may not have it on NBC, I may not have it in any of these other places, but I'll answer every single question. I'll tell you about that one. Look at the overall record. You got the portions of a bullet that struck the president's head. The single most traumatic experience in my professional career was when I was at the FBI lab and held in my hand the two ballistically identifiable portions of pieces of metal that killed a president, that ended a human life, ready to examine them under a comparison microscope with a test bullet. People can say that there is a Secret Service accidental discharge. You think someone would have seen that happen? But apart from whether someone did or didn't say it, you got the bullet that did it. Take a look at the overall record.
Several questioners say that in the movie JFK, during the trial scenes, an illustration used to show the course of the third bullet, I guess the magic bullet, seems incredible. It shows it taking a lot of twists and turns. Did that bullet take the course described by Costner? Was there a fourth shot?
Well, that's the testimony of the 20th doctor. But I'll tell you, since you've asked the question, I'll tell you how this single bullet theory developed. I was a young trial lawyer from Des Moines, Iowa, Washington. The last thing in the world you want to do is to spend months there and come up with the same conclusions as the FBI, that the first bullet struck Kennedy, the second bullet Connally, the third bullet Kennedy. And I followed Earl Warren. I left no stone unturned to find the truth. Well, in the Zapruder film, we numbered each frame in slides. The fatal shot was frame 313. You couldn't see when President Kennedy was first hit because his head disappears behind a freeway sign, and it reappears at a frame with his hands coming up to his throat at frame 225. The camera ran, we had the Zapruder camera, ran at 18.3 frames a second. So if Kennedy was doing this at frame 225, maybe half a second earlier he was hit, say, around frame 215 or 216. You couldn't see exactly where Connally was hit. Now, Connally basically says that he was hit by the second bullet. I reasoned that if I could prove that the rifle could not be fired fast enough to have one rifleman do it all, we had the rifle that the FBI said at that time couldn't be fired faster than 2 1/4 seconds. It actually could, but they told us 2 1/4 seconds. You multiply 2 1/4 times 18.3 frames a second. That's about 40 frames. But you couldn't tell, even with the best photography experts in the world at the time, where Connally was hit. One weekend, I used to go home to Des Moines every other weekend, but one weekend I was working and all of a sudden I got a great idea. Governor Connally's physicians all agreed that he was hit by one bullet. JFK doesn't ever tell you that. The bullet entered his back, exited his right chest, went through the back of his wrist, exited the front of the wrist, and a superficial wound in the leg. And I said he had to be sitting in a certain position to take that wound. And so I contacted Secret Service in Dallas and I said, have Governor Connally's physicians reconstruct his position to show how he had to be sitting to take the wound that he did. And they did that, and I got back with the Zapruder film, and I said, okay, where could he be sitting in this film to take this kind of a hit? And lo and behold, commencing at around frame 200 or so, he could take the hit, or 210, whatever it was. But he couldn't take the hit after frame 240. And if Kennedy was hit at frame 215 or 220, and Connally was not hit after frame 240, and if the camera ran at 18.3 frames a second, a maximum of a second or a second and a quarter, there had to be a second gunman. And I called home that night to my wife. I said, Connie, I think I've done it. I think I've proved there was a second gunman. Well, the only thing wrong was that there wasn't any sign of the bullet that went through President Kennedy's neck. And so we did some wound ballistic tests through the Edgewood Arsenal. What happens to a rifle bullet that passes through a neck this way? How fast does it enter? How fast does it exit? We used goat meat and 20% gelatin compound, different experiments. It entered about 1,900 feet a second, exited at 1,800 feet a second. At that speed, it had to either cause great damage to the car, which it didn't, or hit someone in the car. We then reconstructed the motorcade frame by frame down Dealey Plaza, and lo and behold, commencing around frame 2.7, 2.10 or thereabouts, through a single-lens reflex camera with the rifle scope, Connally and Kennedy are right on line. And so I had to conclude that my second gunman theory was no good and that the bullet indeed that went through President Kennedy's neck struck Governor Connally. That's the way it happened. That's the way the single bullet theory developed, and Arlen Specter was the one that examined the doctors to help develop the theory. I suppose if I never would have done this, who knows what would have happened today, but that's what happened.
There's a new movie out, Jack Ruby. Do you believe that Jack Ruby acted alone and independently?
Oh, Postal Inspector Holmes was part of the conspiracy. David Belin was part of the conspiracy to cover it up. You know, if you go ahead and enumerate all the so-called conspirators, you're going to have 50 or 100 people. My observation in Washington, you know better than I don't think 3 people can keep a secret here. But maybe they can't. Senator Baker could tell us how many people can keep a secret here. Jack Ruby, if you want to read some fascinating literature, if you go to the library to pick up my first book, November 22, 1963, I did that book because of a request that Harrison Salisbury thought I ought to do it. It had the heart of the transcript testimony that I thought should have been included in the Warren Commission report. And you read what Jack Ruby says. Jack Ruby basically claims that on Saturday he had seen a rabbi giving a eulogy about Kennedy. He survived all the wars and then came back to be shot in the back. And he heard that Mrs. Kennedy would have to come back to testify, and basically he never thought about it, but he carried a pistol around with him. And when he was in the basement, when Oswald was brought by, he just impulsively went forward to and killed him, and supposedly to save Mrs. Kennedy the ordeal of coming forward to a trial. The lie detector test corroborated that. I think that there was another reason why that Rabbi Silverman told me that if I write another book, I'll probably say that for the book. But he was not conspiratorially involved, and it's a happenstance. The reason he was not conspiratorially involved is that if he were, the press were told that be down after 10 o'clock if you want to go ahead and make sure you see Oswald transferred, and he wouldn't have waited to come down when he did. And there's another common sense thing. Mafia hit people don't kill their targets in the middle of a police station where they're going to be apprehended and thrown in jail. And you got to have some common sense, just like with the Robert Kennedy thing. He was not conspiratorially involved, and among other things, Rabbi Hillel Silverman does. And if you were to have him or just ask him that question, he'd reach the same conclusion.
A couple of related questions. A questioner asserts, to a degree, the secrecy and occasional carelessness of the Warren Commission and law enforcement encouraged conspiracy theories. What would you have done differently, and why were some parts of the papers closed to the public?
I agree with that, there were mistakes made. I almost resigned from the Warren Commission when Earl Warren made the decision not to release the autopsy photographs and x-rays. My position was that Officer Tippett's widow couldn't withhold evidence from the public concerning the murder of her husband, so why should the Kennedy family be treated differently? Robert Kennedy prevailed upon Chief Justice Warren to do this. I decided to say because I felt that there isn't anyone that would do a more independent job than I, and I did have an obligation to find the truth that I had started. There were mistakes made inside the Warren Commission, apart from not releasing the photographs and x-rays. They, first of all, didn't even have the photographs and x-rays at the testimony when these doctors were there. The Warren Commission, I think, made mistakes. They did not examine Marina Oswald thoroughly enough. Lee Rankin, a fine gentleman, general counsel, was one that examined her. Earl Warren, I think, had some feelings of pity for her. She was a widow in a strange country. Her husband had been charged with killing the president, killing a police officer. The 2 lawyers that were heavily involved in that whole area of Oswald's background, Burt Jenner, who's no longer living, and Jim Liebler, who's now a professor at UCLA Law School, should have really done that. The whole area of secrecy in government is something that really troubles me, and that's why in 1975 I filed Freedom of Information Act requests, having seen everything that the CIA had. Sure, it would disclose sources and methods, but they had withheld evidence from the Warren Commission that they shouldn't have done, the evidence of the CIA assassination plots. I don't condone what they did. What I can tell you is that despite that, we were able to find the truth that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman.
Before I ask the final question, I'd like to present you with a certificate of appreciation for appearing here today and a National Press Club coffee mug. I'd just like to observe that Oliver Stone has both himself since he spoke here too. There's many more questions than we can answer here today, but many of them running along the same lines in different directions. Would you discuss Fidel Castro's role in the assassination or the possibility of KGB involvement? And what was Oswald's motivation? Was he possibly fleeing to a foreign nation?
That's a wonderful question. It's a great question to close with. I have my basic theories about what the motive was for the assassination. I have really not publicly discussed this because if people don't believe me when I say that Oswald was a lone gunman, it's irrelevant what my theories are because they all depend upon what I know to be the fact that Oswald was a lone gunman. I don't think the KGB was involved in this. As for the involvement of Castro, I don't think Castro told Oswald to kill President Kennedy. I will say no more at this time except what I would suggest. You've asked a lot of questions of me, and I wish we had time for more. I wish that when you ask questions of Oliver Stone, you take some time. You can find about Johnny Calvin Brewer in the Warren Commission report. You can find about the photographic evidence, commencing at page 597, I believe, the Warren Commission report on that camera. You have to ask some questions. Why, Mr. Stone, why Warner Brothers, do you lie about Johnny Calvin Brewer and use allusion to Hitler, destroy this country, come forward with the appearance of being patriotic, to release everything when you're lying and destroying this trust and confidence and attacking Earl Warren? What about the Tippit murder witnesses that you covered up? Ask them these questions as you ask me these questions, and do your homework when you do it. And when you do, and when there is a general consensus that indeed the Warren Commission was right, that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman, invite me back here, and I'd be happy to answer those questions of where I think the motivation was and what collateral facts and evidence there was as to why Lee Harvey Oswald killed President Kennedy. And there are some very fascinating aspects of that. Thank you.